10:32 remaining here in this opening quarter.
Pascal's talked about the opportunity of wanting to be the guy, right? And what an opportunity as Trent hits one from the corner. Going to be big for Philly moving forward, not just this year, but when we talk about the future in that two-man game.
Harris, lead pass now after the turnover. Thibault. Boucher cut off momentarily by Thibault. And good job, Gary Trent Jr. He's able to get that shot off, grazes the iron. Maxey reverse, Oturu there, and he takes it away from Embiid. And oh, how slick was that? But stepping out of bounds is Gary Trent Jr. Rims out Oturu, gets it to Gary Trent Jr. in a hurry. Trent Jr. dancing with it, pulls up, jumper no. Oturu battling on the inside and Embiid. Spicy P rolling here early.
And you just look at the pace at which he's shooting. He's working hard, but you know, he's just giving what is being presented to him.
And Trent Jr. clocked down. Gary looks around, puts up a shot. Oh, right on time. Chris Boucher. On the floor, Gary Trent Jr. Trent Jr. sidestep. Doesn't go. There's Boucher. Gets denied. Loose ball. Watanabe battling for it. Loose ball scooped up by Philadelphia. And here's Malachi on the run. Gary Trent Jr. has it denied by Thibault. Siakam 6 of 8, 14 points. Rest of the team 4 for 12 for 10 points. And Gary Trent Jr. the first free throw.
In that, if the Raptors are going to stay in this game, he has to have a good game. But he's not. He doesn't look.
Febreze Light eliminates odors with no heavy perfumes in light scents you'll love. Febreze Light.
2 seasons. 3 seasons, in fact. Here's Malachi, the 3, and Flynn knocks it down from Flynn Flan. Van Vliet on that night, 32 points, 6 of 11 from 3. Made some big shots, as we know, on that night.
Just got to be patient.
Here's Mihai finds Gary Trent Jr. He'll launch it. 3 doesn't go. And Boucher pushed aside for the rebound. Started tightly by Gary Trent Jr. Nearly lost it. Scoops it over to Embiid, who makes a move. Doubled. Loses it. Late whistle.
Because he did everything right. Now it was halfway down. And unfortunately, Philly converts on the other end.
Gary Trent Jr. knocks it down. But we did mention that Siakam did pick up the foul, but there's also some confusion about changing the Boucher to Siakam. We move on. 5-point lead for the Sixers. Lead as large as 8. Oh, Utah with the denial. Gary Trent Jr. scoops it. Sends it to Pascal. Spicy. Lead as large as 8. Oh, Utah with the denial. Gary Trent Jr. scoops it. Sends it to Pascal. Spicy. P with a flush. Just needed a sliver of an opening. Here's Gary Trent Jr. He'll launch it. And the Toronto Raptors trail 55-48 in that first half. Flynn, Watanabe, Boucher, Gary Trent Jr., and Siakam. Boucher lets it fly, and the 3 rattles in. Boucher from Laval. 2 minutes into the second half. Sends it to Gary Trent Jr. and the 3. And that one a little bit short and rebounded by Philadelphia. Chris has been waiting all season for a night like this from 3. 3 of 4. He's got 16 points and 11 rebounds. Embiid, and it rolls off of his foot. Scooped up. It's a 5-on-4. Watanabe underneath. Throw attempts by Philadelphia. Raptors with 9. Here's Gary Trent Jr. Going right at Harris. Oh, what a tough bucket. Contact. Here comes Pascal. Gary Trent Jr. finds the open Watanabe. Splash. Embiid on him. Swings it over now. Gary Trent Jr. with the open look. Short, long rebound. Malachi comes away with it. Looks for Boucher. And Boucher shot no. Here's Harris. Good job by Gary Trent Jr. getting back. Malachi and a reach in by Thibault. Siakam off to Gary Trent Jr. on the take. Over to Malachi. He's got a good look and a 3. Knocks it down. Get it to Pascal. Siakam leads away with 20. Boucher's got 16 and 12. Here's Gary Trent Jr. coming up short with a 3. Tied at 80. 1:17 to go in the third. Curry, Trent Jr. and a foul on Trent Jr. That is going to be his third. Now over to Curry. Back up top. Maxey on the 10 of the shot clock. Deflected. Curry finds Reed, and Reed's back to the free throw line. DJ Wilson will check back in. First doesn't go. Free throw attempt. He's 2 of 4 tonight. 13 points. And he gets that second one. Now 14 points. 4-point game.
Dominant, but that's the stuff you really want to limit, right? Just getting into the red paint at the end of a shot clock and a floater.
Gary shot no. Watanabe keeps it alive, but Trent Jr. Here's Boucher. The threes continue to rain in.
No, from the corner, another one.
Malachi makes a move. Cut off. Gary Trent Jr. launches. And it doesn't go. Niang with a rebound in a 6-point game. Gary Trent Jr. off the mark. Harris with it. See the Raptors facing their largest deficit of the night. Gary Trent Jr. now. It's in the paint. And Pascal puts it back up and through. Remember, see the runner. No. Good job by DJ Wilson. Just taps it. Here's Gary Trent Jr. I have to win it. No! And Boucher on the scene. Here comes 33 to go. 4-point game. What an effort tonight by Toronto. Gary Trent Jr. The runner. We got a 2-point game with 2:22 to go.
Sticking with the play all the way to the end. A lot of hustle on the defensive end for Toronto.
Raptors down by 2. Gary Trent Jr. for the lead. The 3. Got it from Westwood Hills. Now up top. Here's Gary Trent Jr. Back over to Pascal. Over and beat. Oh, what a move. Pascal. 7-6 on the shot clock. Gary Trent. 3. No. Boucher. Out of bounds. It's Toronto basketball. With Wilson. Under 10 of the shot clock. Here's Gary Trent Jr. Gary Trent, the reverse, no. 20 seconds to go in the game. Gonna have to foul, they do.
Almost create a sense of calmness for the team. Okay, let's do this, we're here.
Mihailuk wants to go in a hard-fought game for Toronto, and they fall 114 to 109. Now, a 3 to tie. Gary Trent Jr. and knocked out of bounds. 6.2 to go.